Hello everyone, Charles Watts here. Welcome back to Inside Arsenal. It is Friday. The weekend is nearly here. Just 2 days to go now. How are you all feeling? I'm sure, like me, you are struggling at the moment with what is to come on Sunday at the Emirates. We will talk about that in today's show. Of course, Mikel Arteta's press conference happening a little bit later on at London Colney. But I've got a special guest to join me today, a man who's been on this a couple of times, good friends of the channel, good friend of mine as well, and a fantastic Arsenal reporter. So please do welcome Sam Dean to Inside Arsenal. Dino, good to see you, mate. How are you getting on?
Yeah, all good. Thanks, mate. Thank you for having me on again.
No worries. I won't keep you too long, mate. I know you're shooting off to Mikel's presser fairly soon today. Going to be quite an eventful one. I'm sure. I wonder what sort of mood he's going to be in. What do you reckon? I mean, you know Mikel just as well as everyone else. How do you reckon he's going to be feeling ahead of this? Do you think there's going to be a sense of dread in him, or is he going to be really, really sort of looking forward to what's to come on Sunday?
I think if there is a sense of dread, we won't see it today.
Yeah.
I think the vibe will be very positive, upbeat, optimistic. It's the last press conference of the season, and historically, he's kind of used this as a chance to sort of talk big picture. And yeah, I think even once a couple of years ago, he sort of began the press conference with like an address to the journalists. I think you might have been there for that one. It was sort of unusual, but like I think he sees this as a good chance to kind of wrap up what they've done. But obviously, in previous years, they weren't still in the title race with one game to go, so he might treat it more like a normal one and be a bit more cagey than in other years.
Yeah, I remember that when he walked in. That was when Ganella was next to him, wasn't he? And it was like, oh, Mikel just wants to say something. And he sort of launched into a 5-minute monologue about the season before, the presser got underway. I've forgotten all about that. Yeah.
That was basically when they weren't quite as good as they are now. And the monologue was effectively along the lines of, we're all right here. We're okay. Don't panic. Like, we're going to be fine.
Yeah.
And I think trying to send a message more to the fans than to the actual journalists in the room, which is, that's what press conferences are for. So that's fine.
Yeah, and he's been proven right as well, because here we are, one game to go, and Arsenal got a chance of winning the Premier League title. The trophy's going to be there on Sunday. With as I saw that quote from Mikel when he was receiving his award from Spain, when he spoke to a few reporters saying that the Premier League trophy is going to be there with red ribbons on it on Sunday. It's never happened before since the move to the Emirates, and he's right. Whether Arsenal get their hands on it or not, at the end of it, it's still been one end of the season. We'll talk about that a little bit later on in this show, but you've been writing some really good stuff today, Dino, this week, Dino. So I wanted to get you on the show. We'll talk about it. The piece you've done today is fantastic. And for everyone reading, it's a sort of summary of Arsenal's season. I'm going to drop it in the description below. I've retweeted it as well. It's well worth a read and sums up why you should definitely follow Sam on Twitter if you don't already, because he's one of the best Arsenal reporters out there. So it's well worth a read. But also you did a story earlier in the week about a transfer story about Benjamin Sesko, and obviously we've still got a couple of days to go before the season officially comes to an end in the Premier League season, but transfer story is already beginning to hot up. And it's an interesting one because Sesko's been bubbling away for a fair while, as a player that Arsenal are looking at. We've seen his agent at the Emirates and elsewhere in recent weeks. But this is really interesting that, from what you understand, that other teams potentially in the race for Sesko now believe that Arsenal have moved into pole position for him come the summer.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the sort of journalistically, that was the key detail, really. I think, as you say, there's been some bubbling reports for some time, and I certainly can't claim to be the man who broke the news that Arsenal quite like Sesko. I mean, that's been out there for a while. I think the Evening Standard had a piece on it about a month ago. I think David Ornstein's mentioned it a few times. Sort of the interest is there. So I certainly don't deserve any credit for that, but certainly the key piece of information that kind of led to this piece primarily is the fact that we know at Telegraph of at least one other club who tried to have a conversation around Sesko's future and were given the impression quite strongly that Arsenal were at the front of the queue. Now, that's not to say that Arsenal will definitely formalise their interest, but it does show that this interest is quite far down the line. And I think it's pretty clear, and based on that conversation and a couple of others this week, I think it's pretty clear that he is a player they like very much. And I think what's interesting about Sesko is that he's not really the ready-made 29-year-old big money kind of striker with loads of goals on his CV. He's more of a project signing. He's more of a sort of signing that Arsenal made a couple of years ago when they changed their recruitment model under Edu, obviously now sporting director. So I think that says quite a lot about what they're planning, and also, more importantly, says quite a lot about how Kai Havertz has played in the last sort of 6 months. As anyone watching your videos will know, and anyone who follows Arsenal will know, he's been brilliant as a centre forward since that switch. And in the league, that switch started in early February against Liverpool in that 3-1 victory that kept Arsenal in the title race. And I think ever since then, he's pretty much played as a striker almost exclusively, apart from a few games back in midfield. And you can see what he's bringing to the team. And I think if you're Arsenal, I think this is basically what's happening right now. If you're Arsenal, you're looking at that and thinking, Kai's playing so well right now. Do we need to go out and spend huge money and, more importantly, perhaps massive amount of money on wages for a star player to play up front when we've got Havertz playing so well and there's Jesus? So moving for someone like Sesko, if they choose to do that, is more of a long-term thing, and they can kind of cook him slowly, in the words of Arteta, who said that once about Charlie Patino, I think.
Yeah, hopefully it works out better than Charlie Patino.
Yeah, well, indeed.
I think it's really interesting there when you talk about Kai and the sort of maybe if that has changed Arsenal's mind at all. I mean, we don't know what they were planning come January for the summer in terms of a striker, but whether his form has brought about sort of changing mindset in terms of what they're going to do and why they might go down the Sesko route more than a ready-made, like you said, sort of mid-20 striker who you can never guarantee it, but you'd be more confident would come in and maybe hit the ground running and try and guarantee this sort of mythical 25 goal figure that people talk about. But Havertz has been so good, and Arsenal have been so good, which might maybe even more important than Havertz in terms of how Arsenal have played as a team with Havertz as that focal point, has been so key to this, remarkable 2024 really from Arsenal. But then that kind of begs the question as well. Obviously, Kai was brought in predominantly to play as the sort of left-sided 8 midfielder, wasn't it? The idea wasn't to come in and be a central striker. He could play that role, but the vision was that potentially coming in to replace Granit Xhaka. So if Kai is going to be the long-term solution or one of the long-term solutions to the striker role, then that sort of begs the question in terms of what Arsenal are going to do when it comes to midfield at the end of the season when the transfer window opens. So can you see when you talk about the sort of £100 million striker, or people talk about £100 million striker, I wonder if Arsenal's sort of transfer policy might switch to that sort of big name player to come in and hit the ground running. Could well end up being a midfielder rather than a striker, which might have been the opposite come in January, if you see what I mean.
Yeah. I think the most interesting comment that Arteta made about the Havertz position was after the Brighton game, I think, when they won 3-0, and he was, I think, man of the match, playing up front, scored 1 goal and was just really good throughout the game. And he spoke basically said, and I'm paraphrasing, so don't think this is directly what Arteta said, but it was along the lines of, we had a plan, but sometimes plans go in different ways and you have to let it flow. And I think that was almost like a concession that, right, okay, the Havertz as the left 8 probably didn't work quite as Arsenal hoped, but up front, he's been brilliant. So that shift, as you say, could have a massive impact on their transfer plans for the summer. The other thing I'd say about the striker as well is that, like, there aren't many on the market who are guaranteed to come in. Like, there's no Declan Rice equivalent than there was compared to last summer. Like, Arsenal wanted a big new midfielder who could basically change the whole structure of the team and be a leader of the squad. And Declan Rice was there, and he was pretty much as close as you're going to get to £105 million guarantee. I don't think that striker exists anywhere in Europe. I mean, is Victor Osimhen the closest to that? Maybe, but the cost of that is going to be enormous. And even then, I think he's not played in the Premier League before. There are still question marks to be asked.
I think that's definitely not a guarantee with Osimhen, isn't it? I agree with you. I don't think there isn't one out there. Alexander Isak could be top of the list for me, but there's
how much you got, Charles?
Not enough.
Not enough. Yeah, I agree.
Enough. Yeah.
Unless Newcastle suddenly want to buy all of Arsenal's fringe players, I just cannot see how that works.
Yeah, I don't see it. I think you've reported about Bruno, Arsenal's interest in Bruno as well previously, and you look at if Newcastle potentially are going to lose someone in the summer, it's probably more likely to be Bruno than Alexander Isak. And should Arsenal formalise that interest in Bruno as well? That's just to be a really interesting part of it all, because you wouldn't have thought that would be the plan last summer when Havertz was potentially going to come in and fill one of those midfield positions. But now if he's going to be up front, you could potentially bring Bruno in, and suddenly Declan Rice, the long-term plan might have been to be the 6, could suddenly long-term plan shift to be the 8. And it just, again, shows how things have to be really fluid, and your planning has to be really, really fluid, because players can suddenly perform in roles you didn't expect that can completely change your thinking.
Yeah, I think fluidity is quite a key word. Like, I don't think for example, this is the end of Havertz as a left 8. Like, I really think there's a very good chance that Arsenal tries to revive that plan going forward, especially once Gabriel Jesus is back to full fitness and on top form, because we know how good he can be and we know how much Arteta likes him. So I certainly don't think that sort of experiment is over. But yeah, fluidity is important. And when you look at that squad, having Rice who can play 6 and 8, Havertz who can play 8 and 9, that's what Arteta's always wanted, like that flexibility and that ability to have top-class players who can do multiple different things in multiple roles. I mean, when you mentioned the midfielder thing, and this is very much sort of my opinion now rather than any kind of transfer information, but like, I look at that squad and think, given the probable likelihood of a player like Emil Smith-Rowe leaving, I think he needs to for the good of his career, and the fact that Havertz is now playing more as a number 9, I think there's a real gap for a creative, sort of forward-thinking left-sided number 8 who can kind of beat people, create things out of nothing, and provide that kind of spark and that little bit of extra magic in the final third. I don't know if Bruno is that player. I think he's more of a sort of box-to-box or more of a deep line number 6. And I do wonder if they might sort of look around and see who could be out there as a left 8, a bit more creative, a bit more silky, and someone who can unlock the door a bit more. I don't know. Is that what you think they need as well?
I really like Declan Rice playing at number 8. I really do. When he came in, I thought he was definitely going to be a 6, and you know, he can play that position pretty much better than anyone. But I've really liked what I've seen from Rice as that left-sided 8 and what he can bring to the attack. And I just think the more he plays there, the better he's going to get. And we know with Declan, one of his biggest sort of attributes is his ability to learn and improve season on season. And I'm really liking what I'm seeing from him there. So I'm just not sure if I think I'd rather get a proper number 6 and have Declan Rice and Odegaard ahead of him. I don't know though, because can you have a really sort of creative left 8 alongside Odegaard as a sort of right 8?
If we want to get let's get nerdy about this. If you look at the way Arsenal press out of possession, it's normally like a 4-4-2 as their shape, and Odegaard will be in the 2 pressing with Havertz. So therefore, the left 8 has to sit in a 4 and a bit deeper, and that's what Rice is brilliant at. Him and Jorginho or Thomas Partey will sit in that midfield 2 while Odegaard goes and leads the press. So the concern, if you buy another left 8, will be finding someone who can do that, who can do that kind of defensive stability role, which Xhaka did brilliantly last year, as we know. And at the start of this season, they had Odegaard sitting in alongside Rice, and Havertz was pressing. And I think Arsenal's defence really struggled compared to the second half of the season, at least, when they didn't have Odegaard leading that press. So one of the things that moving Havertz forward has done is also unleashed Odegaard off the ball and made a big difference for them there. So yeah, that would be the concern. Let's say, for example, they go for a playmaker type left 8. Would that then necessitate Odegaard dropping deeper without the ball and playing a more defensive role? And would that be worth it, for example? But I mean, the player, again, I've got no information on this, and certainly not one that I'm in any place to report, because I just don't know. But a player I've always thought would be absolutely perfect for Arteta is Frankie de Jong at Barcelona. And I know the cost there would be enormous, especially on wages, but everyone knows about Barcelona's financial difficulties. And I look at a player like him who can play as a 6 or an 8, depending on the game. And like, you can almost imagine him and Rice swapping over depending on the opponent and the spaces that might appear. And I think, you know, if someone said to me, "Oh, what's your dream Arsenal signing?" That's the one for me. If they can even like begin that conversation, I don't know. And the finances on it would be massive. So probably unlikely. And again, I've got no information in that regard. But as a style of player, I look at that and think that is what they need.
Yeah, you and James Benge are on the exact same page with that. James Benge has sat here and said the exact same thing to me. If you could sign one player that would be perfect for this Arsenal system, it'd be Frankie. I just don't want to see massive changes in the summer. I don't want to see Arsenal starting this season and trying to sort of learn and adapt. And I just want to kind of see them hit the ground running like how they've ended this season. When you look at, you know, where they're probably going to fall short this season, it was the first half of it, and they weren't quite as fluid. They were grinding out results. You know, they were still winning games. And, you know, come Christmas, they were still top of the table. But you could kind of, it felt like they were learning on the job, and players were learning positions on the job, and the team were getting used to players playing in different roles. And I'd love to see them just continue on from how they're ending this season to continue at the start of next season. So I don't want to see big changes and structural changes by Mikel. I'd much rather him to, this is clearly a winning formula that he has now. And so I don't want to see that sort of ripped up and him to have big, massive ideas of changing things. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting. I mean, you look at what's to come this Sunday. It's very, very simple. Obviously, Man City win, nothing Arsenal can do. Draw and lose, and Arsenal can take advantage and win the Premier League title with a win against Everton. When you look at what's to come this Sunday, do you have any hope whatsoever for Arsenal, and that you might be sitting there in the press box on Sunday watching Martin Odegaard lift that Premier League trophy?
No.
Not the answer, Dino.
Sorry.
No, I agree.
to be honest, if you take this season in isolation and you look at it just based on these 37 games and this 38th game to come, you'd be like, yeah, of course there's a chance. Of course there's a chance. There's one game to go. Like, loads could happen. City are without their best goalkeeper for the weekend. And of course, like, they've had games this season where they've been quite poor and had to grind it out. And West Ham, David Moyes' last game, of course there's a chance. Then you look at this City team and what they have done over the past 4 years, or even longer, since Pep Guardiola got there, really, and their ability to basically hit their goal and rise to the occasion in these moments. Like Liverpool, for example, they've experienced this quite a few times where you're desperately hoping for City to slip up and it just doesn't happen. They just don't do it. And they're so conditioned to win. I think this prospect of a fourth league title in a row, the first team in England to ever do it, I think that's given them real fire in the belly. And I just don't, like, there's no historic precedent of City bottling it. They just don't do it.
The worst thing about it is they've got precedent of nearly bottling it and then somehow managing to turn it around and win it. And I think that'd be the worst for the lot. I think I'd rather them be 3-0 up after 15 minutes than to be 1-0 down with 20 minutes to go and then suddenly turn it around, because that'd just be so hard to take, I think.
City are the best in Europe on the big margins in terms of they've got the best players, the best manager, the best squad, the best philosophy, the best training, the best everything. But they're also brilliant on the small margins and the tiny moments. And you think about, for example, Vincent Kompany smashing the ball in the top corner from 25 yards against Leicester a few years ago. Or you think about even Ortega's save against Son Heung-min on Tuesday. Like, those are the tiny details that separate title races, and City always seem to come out on top in those. So, yeah.
I don't want to be
downbeat on it from an Arsenal point of view.
I don't want to think about Ortega's save from Son Heung-min on Tuesday night. I've thought about that too much since Tuesday night. I mean, Arsenal's record on the final day is great. I saw this from the Premier. They've won the last 12 games on the final day of the season for the last 12 years. So you'd hope.
How many of those? I mean, this sounds like a dig, and it's not. It's a genuine question. How many of those was there like something riding on it?
There was. I'm
looking at not the last two.
Yeah, I'm looking at that list. The West Brom 3-2 and the Newcastle 1-0. Those were both the final days of the season. You know, when it was Arsenal versus Tottenham for the top four. And so that
Arsenal was 10 years ago.
That was the West Brom with Kieran Gibbs' tackle, and I think Koscielny got the winner at Newcastle. I don't think any of the other ones had anything riding on it.
I don't think so either.
I think the Burnley 3-1, that was Emery's final day. No, it was done and dusted by then, wasn't it? Yeah, no, it was done and dusted by then.
It was done and dusted by then. Watford was done and dusted. Brighton game was a really important one, actually. As a complete aside, that was the first game with fans.
Nicolas Pepe scored twice, didn't he?
Yeah, and it was the first time that Martin Odegaard had played in front of fans. And obviously, if you remember at the time, there was a bit of like online discussion about whether Arsenal should try and keep Odegaard or buy him permanently, or maybe they should move for someone like Emi Buendia, for example. And that game, I think the 10,000 fans in the Emirates saw for the first time Odegaard in the flesh, and like he got a standing ovation. Arteta took him off in the 89th minute to sort of give him his moment. And obviously, as we all know, he went on to stay at the club. So I think that was quite an important day for Odegaard individually and as a consequence for Arsenal as a whole. But that's totally a separate point, and I'm rambling, so I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's fine. Do you think they'll feel any sort of pressure going into Sunday? Are you worried that might sort of not get the better of them, but might weigh on their shoulders a little bit? I've not really seen much in this run-in, apart from obviously the Villa game, but you look at what they've had to go through in this run-in just to be in with a chance in the final day, the places they've had to go, the big games they've had to win, and they've done it all. There hasn't been that sort of weight of expectation, or it certainly hasn't felt like that weight of expectation has been holding them back at all. So I don't really fear, I don't see them turning up on Sunday and being sort of dragged down by the occasion. Do you?
I felt that a little bit watching the game at Old Trafford.
Yeah.
I felt like this was a really bad United team. without any kind of coherent plan or structure, and Arsenal were not on it.
No.
So I did feel that a bit then, and that was obviously playing last on the weekend, having known that City won, so they had to win. I suspect there will be a little bit of pressure and weight on them, but I also suspect that the message from Arteta and the coaching staff is going to be, look, it's not in our hands. Go out and enjoy it. Do what you've done all season. I mean, I'm pretty sure Arsenal will win. What I think could happen is a quite cagey opening half an hour, maybe first 45 minutes, and everyone's a bit nervous. And also, there's a very real prospect that, let's say City West Ham is 0-0 at half time. Now, that's possible. That's absolutely possible. And Arsenal aren't winning. Can you imagine the mood in the Emirates and what people will be saying? Like one goal at that point, one goal will be enough to win Arsenal the league, and then the pressure will hit, and it will hit hard. A lot of these players have never been that close to a trophy before,
no.
a major one. So they don't know how they're going to handle that, and that would be a very interesting scenario. But equally, City might score 3 in the first 5 minutes, and it's all over. At which point Arsenal will roll through and score 8, and it'll all be a happy send off, but without a trophy.
Yeah. It's important, I think, to score a goal early on, because even then, word will filter through at the Etihad. You want to try and put any sort of pressure you can on City and make it as nervy as you possibly can for them. So if you can score early and word filters through at the Etihad to the crowd and everything that Arsenal winning, it might do something. He's expecting the same team as what we've seen at Trafford recently. I can't imagine he's going to make any changes, barring any injuries that we don't really know about.
Yeah, I think it'll be the same team, to be honest. What's the situation with goal difference?
Well, Arsenal, if it goes to goal difference, then Arsenal win. There's nothing City can do.
Yes, Arsenal got one better goal difference. Yeah. Good thing City didn't score a third, eh?
Yeah. Well, it wouldn't if they'd had to score 2, because I thought that when they got the penalty, it was like, they got 5 minutes where they'd have to score 2, because if they'd have scored a third, then it would have only come into account if Arsenal had won the game. So they'd have scored against Everton, so they'll score 1 extra goal, if you see what I mean. So.
Oh, I see. Yes, of course. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So I can't imagine any changes. No, I didn't think there was a few players were off it. Like you said, I think the weight of maybe the pressure of basically knowing that the title was on the line against United, wasn't it? You don't win that game, then the title was done and dusted pretty much in all but mathematics. So I think they maybe felt a bit of pressure on that. I think also they played into their United was so terrible that Arsenal just knew that they were going to win that game once they'd scored the first goal, and they just weren't. I think that was kind of I just think they got a little bit ahead of themselves maybe, and they're just very, very confident they weren't going to concede.
I think the one change I personally would strongly consider would be bringing Zinchenko in. I know he's sort of a bit of a divisive talking point among the fans at the moment, but Everton are going to play a deep block, they're going to be low, they're going to sit, and they're going to wait for Arsenal to break them down. And I think Zinchenko, when he plays, he provides those sort of defence-splitting, line-breaking passes better than anyone really, and certainly better than Takahiro Tomiyasu. So that would be one I personally would be sort of veering towards, but equally he's not played much minutes in the last couple of games, if at all. Actually played any minutes.
No, he's so far down the pecking order now. All of a sudden,
Also, I wonder, and he wouldn't start this. I'm sure he wouldn't start, but let's say Arsenal get to the point where they're 4-0 up and City are 3-0 up. Would be quite nice to see Timber for 20 minutes. Equally, they might think, well, hang on, just don't do anything stupid. Just give him now 2 months until the new season starts, so he's properly ready. But I think that would be a nice sort of crowd lifting moment in the event of City sort of running away with it.
No, I agree. I think the last couple of games, when there's been so much on the line, you kind of want every single player on that bench. You want to know that you have full confidence that they're fit and ready, and if you need them, you can turn to them. And I think the fact that Timber's just not played for that long, as much as it'd be nice to see him on the bench, I can understand why Mikel's probably thought, you know what, it's probably not the right decision to bring him on here, but he might well do it against.
I thought he's been amazing in training.
Again, you kind of look back and you just think if Thomas Partey and Timber have been fit all season, how many extra points would Arsenal got? It was, especially in that first half. But how do you sum up the season? You wrote really good pieces before we wrap this up. You wrote a really good piece on this. That I retweeted earlier. Everyone, I said at the start, it's in the description below, looking at Arsenal's season as a whole. And, whatever happens on Sunday, I think it's absolutely, you sum it up really, really well in that, in terms of what Arteta has done and how, again, the club are certainly going to view it as progress. And I think it's undeniable that there's been progress. If they win on Saturday, on Sunday, it's 28 wins. They've scored more goals than they've ever scored in the Premier League season before. They've conceded the fewest in the Premier League this season, got the best goal difference in the Premier League this season. Yes, ultimately it's not going to be enough to stop the juggernaut that is Manchester City, but there has been progress from last year, which was so unexpected and so thrilling. But you can't look at this team now and not say that this team is a better Arsenal team than the one we saw last season. I think it just 100% is. And so I think the season's been good. You can't call it a success because they haven't won anything, but I think it's been good and the progress is there. So how do you kind of view where Arsenal are, even if the title doesn't end up at the Emirates on Sunday?
Yeah, I think what's really important this year is that they've kind of shown that they're here to stay. I think last season there was you could reasonably believe, especially given the way they tailed off in the spring and the way they fell out of the title race, it would be reasonable to believe that could have been a bit of a flash in the pan, or like a team that hit an amazing hot streak and just young players all came together at once and then kind of faded away. A little bit like, and this might be a bit harsh on Tottenham, but like a little bit like Tottenham when they had that amazing team under Pochettino and really pushed for the league title with Dele Alli and Harry Kane. And like, yeah, I think Arsenal have come into this season and gone, they're more, and we can now say they're more mature, they control games better, they're just as dangerous, they defend better. And there's no reason, looking at any of the sort of underlying numbers or any of the players in the squad, any of the age profiles, there's no reason to believe that they're going to get any worse. I think if anything, they're going to get better by the week. And that's what's sort of been happening this season. I think that will fill Arteta and the executives and the hierarchy above him with a lot of optimism and encouragement. And not to bring Spurs into it twice, but Ange Postecoglou has been making the point all season that like just winning, just getting into the top four is not in itself like a silver bullet, for example. And like actually you want to see some sustained progress, the philosophy bedding in, the players buying into it, the whole thing sort of coming together, almost irrespective of like outcome. Obviously Arsenal's main goal is the outcome of winning the league, but if you take away that specific thing, which is very big obviously, but look at like the project, the journey, the trajectory, I think it's all pointing in one direction. And yes, City are there, they're the juggernaut, but I think Arsenal have basically done all they could and all they could expect to do. And there's still reason to believe they're a team in growth. I'm not sure that's necessarily true of City. I think their cycle that they're currently in is going to come to an end. Liverpool, we know, big changes coming. And I think Arsenal are really, really well placed as it stands to kick on next season and go again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think the start to next season is going to be really, really important. I think they've got to try and really get on it early on and just be able to continue on with that. And I think if they do that, then they've got a hell of a chance next season because they're going to improve. Like you said, I think they've improved massively this season. You look at the record against the big six, if you want to call them that. I think it's 22 points from 30 against those teams. Unbeaten against Liverpool, unbeaten against Man City, unbeaten against Chelsea, United, Spurs. They've done so many things right this season. But yeah, I think we're all going to look back. There's always those moments, the Fulham games, the West Ham game. You're always going to look back on the season and see where it's potentially gone wrong or the titles slip through your hands. But there's been a lot to like about it. And I think for an Arsenal fan, sort of talking from my Arsenal fan point of view now, I've waited 20 years to have a team like this, watching a team like this at Arsenal. So yeah, as disappointing it might well be if we walk away from the Emirates on Sunday not having seen that title lifted, there's still an awful lot to like about what we're seeing from the football club at the moment. And I think that's something to certainly take into the summer. Look, we're getting towards the half-hour mark now. I know you've got to shoot off. Like you said, you're heading off to Colney today. You know why I'm not at Colney today, Sam? Guess why I'm not at Colney today? Because it's my kids' school disco.
At what time?
It starts at 4:00, but normally they go to after school club on a Friday, which means that I could go to Colney, get back for 5:00 to pick them up. But because they've got a school disco today, I've got to pick them up at school time at 3:00, get them home, get them changed, get them back to the school disco for an hour, and then go and pick them up again.
Are you going to be sort of involved in the disco in any way on the decks?
I am not on the decks yet. Wheel out my old record collection. I'm sure they'll love that. Some banging trance to 8 and 9-year-olds at school. No, my task is dropping into school and then picking them up an hour later and then being totally hyped up and doing my head in on the car journey back. But so yeah,
I mean, I don't know much about parenting, as you can imagine, but I think from what I know, the key is to give them like 4 or 5 bags of sweets just before they go in, just to just pump them full of sugar, and then you can deal with that problem later. Make it a later problem. I'm sure that's how it works.
It's not really how it works. No, they're always hyper. Anyway, but yeah, that's my reasoning for not being at the final press conference of the season. The joys of fatherhood. Look, mate, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for everyone watching. Thank you for watching it and for listening. Like I said, get into the description below. Links in there to Sam's Sesko story and also the really good story he's done today on Arsenal's season as a whole. So please do read it and get over to Twitter as well and follow him. You can find the link down in the description to that as well. Thank you very much, Dino. I appreciate your time, mate. Have a good one today. I won't see you on Sunday. I'll be sitting in the stands opposite you, but although you might see me on the pitch afterwards when 60,000 head on there to celebrate the win. Have a good one, mate. I'll catch up with you soon.
Thanks, mate. Enjoy it. Good luck.
See you later. Bye-bye.